Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic, let's do it. What is the weirdest, creepiest, or most unexplainable thing that you have ever seen? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My mom died when I was 15, and a few months after her death, I was sitting home alone when the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and it said unknown. I answered and heard a woman's voice that sounded croaky and just odd. She said, "Hello, honey, I'm a friend of your dad." She started talking about how she felt bad about my mom dying, saying she was sorry. Something about her was really weird and off, but I thought if it was someone Dad knew, I should try to be polite. She asked me how old I was, and a few other things about me. Then she said, "Your dad had an affair with me. He loves me." She said my name too, which was really effing weird. I was so shocked that I just said, "No, I don't think he'd cheat on Mom." She laughed and said, "Oh yes, honey. Yes, he did. Your mama was a nice lady, but he loved me." She got quiet a minute and then whispered, "Oh, you don't know who I am? F." I was way too freaked out and hung the phone up. Never mentioned it to my dad. Never will. When I was about 11 or 12, I was walking home from a friend's house to have dinner with my family. It was middle of winter, so it was already pretty much dark as I started walking home. When I got to the top of my street, an old truck stops next to me and the driver yells at me, "Hey, come here!" I couldn't see who was driving and didn't recognize the vehicle, so my stranger danger sense kicked in and I ran as fast as I could the rest of the way home. The guy didn't follow me, but I was still pretty freaked out. A few months later, I see on the news that a boy about my age had been kidnapped and dumped in a nearby canyon. The guy didn't kill the boy. I guess he got cold feet and just decided to ditch the kid. Anyway, they caught the guy, and he admitted to attempting to kidnap other boys. They showed the vehicle we had used, and it was the same exact truck that I'd seen that night. I still wonder what would have happened to me if I hadn't run away. I grew up in an area with a lot of Amish people. A few years ago, late in the summer, I was taking my mom's dog for a walk. There was a road behind her development that sloped downhill with a lot of fields that eventually turned into barns and houses that bent into a wooded area. My mom worked second shift, and I felt bad for her dog being cooped up in the house, so I decided to take the pup for a long walk for some exercise. As I started walking down the hill, a cat came out from behind a house, then another, then more, from fields, houses, until I was being followed down this road by no less than half a dozen cats. The dog was still relatively calm, which was weird for her because she usually spent the nights running in circles around my mom's modular home, jumping over people and couches to make sure she could still run in a perfect circle. I kept going down this road, which stretched out for probably a mile in front of me before bending into the trees. The sun was beginning to go down, and that's when I started to hear yelling. At first I thought it was Amish folks just bringing in livestock for the evening, but then I noticed a pattern, and it evolved into this weird, indescribable chanting or singing. Someone had a drum. I started slowing down, and I heard dogs barking from all over the place. Then a few people opened the front doors to their homes and were just staring at me. I noped the F out of there and ran the whole way up that hill with the dog. Cats still following until we got onto the main road. Never went that way for a walk again. Way back in college, we had this notorious campus groper on the loose. Some guy was jumping out of the bushes, smacking ass, then running off. Mostly women, of course. So this one night I'm walking home and, yep, I got groped. The weird, creepy part is I'm a pretty average, nasty-looking dude. Who gropes that? I mean, seriously. Not creepy, more weird, strange. After my grandpa passed on, we returned home and my fiancé headed to our back porch to water our plants. A couple minutes later, I hear him scream bloody murder. I go running outside, and I can barely piece together two words as he's pointing furiously at our tomato plant. Mind you, he's still screaming. I look down, and there's a little tree frog hanging out on the edge of the pot. We proceeded to get frogs for the next month on our porch, in our apartment, in our cat's water bowl daily. Not a day went by that a frog didn't come by to say hey. Then one day they just disappeared. My papa and I loved frogs. It was something his father, my great-grandfather, instilled in the two of us. My papa was a very soft-spoken man, and I like to think he wanted to make his presence known in a very sentimental way. I also learned my fiancé is absolutely terrified of frogs, so there's that. Once I was in the car with my friend during a relatively calm night. It was beginning to storm, and as we were hanging out in the car, something I can only describe as a mini lightning bolt, almost like a small line of electricity about the size of an index finger, popped up in the middle of a car and floated there. It was so odd, and I asked if he saw it, thinking I was crazy, but he saw it too. I've tried to find out what it was, but it hasn't happened since, and there was never a feasible explanation as to how a seemingly small stripe of electricity just sat floating in my car. Makes me think it was some sort of matrix glitch or something. My stepdad and his sister both had cancer and died within 24 hours of each other. My family got a phone call saying she had passed away. Stepdad had been pretty much in a coma for days because it had spread to his brain. It was just a matter of time. His mom comes over and tells him that it's okay. He can go now and not hurt anymore. Within 5 minutes, he sits straight up in bed, eyes wide, staring at the corner of the room with this amazed look on his face. Lays down, slowly, takes a breath, and that was it. He was gone. To this day, I wonder what it is he saw in the corner, or how on the much morphine he could wake up like that. It's like his sister came to get him. If you believe that sort of thing is possible, that's a very comforting thought. I mean, sad that they lost their lives in such short succession, but, it seems like they were pretty ill, and that's it, so hope it's true. Also, one more. I was hiking with a group of friends. We're like 25 miles up in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, and I go to take a dump. These toilets are basically a box over a hole. I look down as you do, and there's a fake leg sitting in there. An effing fake leg. So somebody decided, nope, and walked 20 plus miles out of the valley on one leg. 8th grade camp with my student council. Got woken up at like 2 a.m. to a bunch of kids running around outside our cabin speaking a language that sounded like Portuguese or something. My friend woke up too. It was pitch black outside. We were like, what the? But eventually fell back asleep. The next day, we asked the camp counselor what was up with the other campers being able to play games out at 2 a.m. and we had to be in with lights out. He was very confused. Assured us our group was the only one that stayed overnight and thought we were pranking him. This camp is in the middle of the woods, nothing around. Still kind of weirds me out. I used to work in a haunted movie theater. The building that it's in is over 95 years old and it just looks old. There's downstairs theaters, theaters 1 and 2, and 2 upstairs theaters, theaters 3 and 4. One night I'm by myself cleaning theater 4 when I suddenly get the feeling that someone is watching me. That's not too surprising because sometimes people stay until the very end of the credits, but you just don't notice them. So I looked around the theater and looked for anyone, but it was empty. I tried to ignore the feeling, but it got worse. Something in my mind was telling me that I had to get out soon or something bad was going to happen. I stopped to try to calm myself down when I get a feeling that whatever was watching me is in this darkened corner in the back of the theater. I stare at it, and it just looks darker than everywhere else. I say this and leave. This has happened a few more times, same feeling, same dark corner, before I eventually tell my coworkers that I'll do everything else, but I can't go back up there alone. 2 months later, a worker who I've never met comes back from college and starts working. His first shift black. He goes to clean theater 4 and he comes back down saying it was too creepy and that someone was watching him. Driving home one night in Colorado on a road headed west that has a bird's eye view of the entire Front Range. I swear to God, the entire sky lit up like it was daybreak. I thought for sure Utah had been nuked. A few years ago, I was stationed in Okinawa with the Army. At the time, I was big into geocaching, finding hidden containers using GPS for those not familiar. We were on the southern end of the island. My wife stayed in the car while my son, around 6 or 7 at the time, and I went to look for a geocache that was in the area. This end of Okinawa has a lot of cliffs overlooking the ocean. We were maybe 50 to 75 feet from the cliff edge, and I had to go off the trail to find the container. I told my son to stay right there on the path since I wouldn't be out of sight. I find the container and begin signing the logbook to prove I found it when my son asks if I was almost done. I told him I was, and he said, "Good, Daddy. I saw hands." I repeated what he said, and he said, "Yeah." I put everything back the way I found it, grabbed his hand, and hustled back to the car. The whole way back, I questioned him about what he saw. The way he described it, he saw a pair of hands moving towards him. Not a person, only hands. He said that he could see through them. I had not told him nor my wife about the area we were in. During World War II, during the Battle of Okinawa, a lot of people killed themselves by jumping from these cliffs to avoid being captured by the American forces. The legends about the sea and the area say that if you're an American, and especially if you are a male, that the angry spirits of those that jumped will try to push you off of the cliffs. Needless to say, wife was more than a little upset that I hadn't shared this information before we went there. My sister and I were walking home at around 8 p.m., still earlyish but dark already. A van was stopped at a road we crossed with someone in it. We didn't think much of it and kept walking. Nearly as soon as we finished crossing, the car starts up and begins driving next to us, a lane over at walking speed. The man in the car rolls down his window, and I didn't exactly feel like being kidnapped. Both of us are teenagers, so I pulled out my phone to call someone. The man sees this and drives away, but still incredibly slowly, and for some unknown reason, literally stuck his whole torso out of the window and stared us down while driving off. A very similar thing happened to my sister the next day, but during the day. Senior year of college, lived in a house with 4 other dudes. The house was at least 85 to 100 years old, so it's seen some stuff. A few weeks in, we started hearing really weird noises. Child laughter, running, some banging noises. I had the whole 3rd floor to myself. The attic had been refinished with carpet and whatnot, so pretty huge area. Only downside was that the ceiling was slanted, so not much moving space, and the stairs up were as steep as could be. I was talking lean back when going down steep. Flash forward a month in, and I'm in the kitchen drinking some juice. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a small child wearing red overalls run by me. We don't have a child living with us. I kind of wrote it off as I am crazy. A few days passed, and I had mentioned to my friend about the kid running by me. He suggests, while standing in my room, to call someone to come over and cleanse the house. I laugh about it and say, "Yeah, sure." That must have really pissed this ghost kid off, because that night I'm laying in bed, couldn't have been more than 3 minutes, and I see this small dark figure standing by the stairs. I say, "Hello," no answer, but it moves towards my bed. Not fast, not threatening. Now, this is the attic, remember? There are no fans up there, and it was Octoberish, so windows were all closed. I go to grab my cell to turn on the flashlight, and boom, that figure is right in front of my face in the blink of an eye. I kind of fell backwards into laying on my bed. Then I could feel this wind blowing like it's on top of me. My hair is flopping around like I put my head outside of a moving car. Then the pressure starts. Slow at first, then gaining. The pressure on my chest and face. I was petrified. Then, as quick as it started, it stopped. The wind ended, the pressure was gone, and the figure was gone. I ran downstairs and freaked the F out. It was no bueno. I have 2. One is more creepy and supernatural, the other sucks. Sucks, so I'm currently in college. When I get there, I have to park in a lot of the outskirts of campus, then take a bus to the center of campus. Literally every day I'll arrive at my lot just as the bus pulls out. Even leaving home 5 to 10 minutes early or late will have this exact result. Creepy. While growing up, I'd spend most of my time in my room. One day I went to go get food, left my room and closed the door on the way out. I returned with my food to grab the knob to open the door. The moment my hand touched the door, no, don't open the door. But I opened it, and the voice became a sort of pain-filled scream. I then felt like I had just been punched in the stomach, fell to the floor, lost vision, food went flying. I picked myself back up after a few seconds and ran from my house. To this day, I will never close that door or enter the room if it's closed. I was walking home late one night in the alleys of the old city of Damascus. I turned down one and came across a circle of what must have been around 20 cats, all meowing at each other. They clocked me and were silent. There was an awkward pause. Then I, and to this day I'm not sure why, raised my hands like I was under arrest and slowly walked up to them. I had to step through the circle to get by it, and just as slowly edged my way, hands still raised around the corner. As soon as I was out of sight, I heard them all start meowing again. A friend and I were in the nursery part of an old house watching a movie. As we were watching, the sound of the movie drops to almost mute, and we both hear a voice come through the walls. "Where is?" Neither of us understood who they asked for. As soon as the voice stopped, the second went back to normal. We both looked at each other, and without a word, excited, and exited the room as fast as we could. My uncle was blind and handicapped. He died at around 46 years old, I believe, but he was no bigger than a 14-year-old. Well, he lived his whole life with his grandparents. When he died, my grandma would never allow the bedroom light to be turned off because it somehow made her feel as if he was still in there. Well, one day I decided to just walk in there and kind of reminisce, thinking about past experiences or whatever. As I was leaving to shut the door, I looked back, and for whatever reason, I said, "I love you, Uncle Randy." Now, I don't believe the dead can hear you speak to them, and I don't necessarily believe they can speak to you either. That's just me. However, when I turned around, I heard his voice. He said, "I love you too." I shut the door and left. I have no idea how it can be explained outside of just my brain wanting to hear his voice so badly that I hallucinated it or whatever. Also, this isn't really creepy, but more not really explainable, unless you're religious, I guess. I had just bought a 2013 Lincoln MKS, and for anyone that may be familiar, you know they aren't small vehicles, pretty wide. Well, my dad, my brother, and myself are going on vacation. We are about 4 hours from home, and it's 8 or 9 at night. We are on the highway, and I'm driving about 80 miles per hour. There's an 18-wheeler just to my right, and a guardrail to my left. In front of me is a lifted dually. I can't see in front of him for obvious reasons. All of a sudden, he guns it, and gets in front of the 18-wheeler, and all of a sudden, there is this green Chevy Sonic or something similar just stopped right in front of me. I'm talking like no more than 100 feet. The lane is closing somehow, and there were no signs to indicate this. Naturally, I slammed on the brakes, and the car starts skidding to a stop, but there's still no way I'll stop in time. Naturally, I slammed on the brakes. So, for whatever reason, I guess I kicked into autopilot and gunned the throttle and swerved to the right. Now remember, the 18-wheeler is right there. Somehow, I managed to pass between the car and the 18-wheeler with no more than an inch to spare on either side of my side view mirrors. I don't know how it happened. The lane was closing. A car in one lane, a huge truck in the other, and somehow I fit that fat Lincoln between both of them. At those speeds, the timing to every move I made had to be absolutely perfect. It was insane, and my vision whited out for at least 15 seconds after I got straight because of the ridiculous adrenaline rush I had.